Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Diplomatic Enclave. I'm your host Omar Khalid. But as you know, which is the norm of the show, we interview ambassadors, we interview heads of international organizations, sometimes prime ministers and ministers as well. Today we deviate from the norm. Why are we deviating from the norm? Because we are going to interview a person who fell in love with a certain aspect of our country, Pakistan, and the aspect is the mountains. We've had many mountaineers who've come to Pakistan and more or less fell in love with the whole range that Pakistan is very well known for. This is a person who has, climbed many a peak, but she started her career on a very different tangent, that of a journalist. Being a journalist myself, I was very intrigued to understand what brought that change in her attitude, because of course I myself have gone through that change from pursuing medicine to becoming a journalist. So change is interesting, change is important, but what brings that change and how do you adapt to that change and how do you excel once you change is what we are going to ask her. Her name is Billi Bierling and she is a Swiss national. The place that she was born in, I wouldn't want to know, name it, I want her to say more about it. I'll leave most of the conversation this time to her. Billi Bierling, thank you very much to have joined us.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here.
Oh, the pleasure is all ours. So many things when it concerns you, Billi. First of all, Billi is not your real name. Why does everybody call you Billi then?
Everybody. So I was christened with the name Barbara. And on this planet, I don't think there's one single person who calls me Barbara. Now, when I was young and at school, we had my parents didn't know when they called me Barbara that everybody called their kids Barbara at the time. So there were 5 Barbaras in my class. So the one was Babs, Babsy, Barbie, Barbara, and then there was nothing left for me. And my last name is Bierling. They called me Billi. And
from that it became Billi.
Yes, and you know what? In my Swiss passport, and I also have a German passport, it says now stage name Billi Bierling.
Stage name?
I have a stage name. Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
But you also change names, but you also change directions. First of all, I'd like to understand why be a journalist? What prompted you? What motivated you to enter this field?
Well, I was actually a translator. I started off as a translator.
Oh.
I started off, if I start off at my school life, I was very bad at school. I left school when I was 16. I had no direction. And when I was 18, my father said, hey, I know somebody in America. Do you want to go to America and be a nanny, like an au pair girl? And I spent a year in the States. And finally, I could do something. I could speak English. Because otherwise, I had no hobbies. I had no interests. So I could speak English, so I became a translator. And then I moved to England and I started translating for the Financial Times.
Oh.
Because at the time there was a Financial Times Germany in the German language. And then I thought, I want to write these articles myself. And then I went to City University and did a degree in radio journalism, and then I became a journalist. But I think as a journalist, you need to be curious. You need to, I want to find out about people. And I think now in our society, I don't know what it's like here in Pakistan, people love to talk about themselves. Sometimes I have conversations and I ask questions.
Narcissism kind of supersedes, doesn't it?
And it's not that now I get the chance to talk about myself for I don't know how long for. But a lot of people don't ask questions. And I find it doesn't matter. You meet somebody and you think, oh, they're really boring. You start and ask questions, and you find out everybody has an interesting story
Exactly.
to tell.
That is the job of a journalist, to make even the dullest of things interesting.
Yeah. And that's what I love about journalism.
What has been your motto as a journalist? What interesting stories do you have to share with us? Because in my career also, I have so many very, very interesting stories to narrate, but not for this show because you are my guest. But what can you tell us? As a journalist, what did you experience that still stays with you?
I have one story that actually happened to me in Pakistan.
Oh.
I wasn't a journalist then, I was on the other side. So I worked for the United Nations, for UNHCR, and then for OCHA as a public information officer, so a press person. And I have one beautiful story that really shows what an impact stories made. I was in Quetta in Balochistan, And we went to
Which year was that?
that was in, I can tell you, in 2012, I think.
All right.
And we went to the Afghan camp, which is our village, and we had a wheelchair to give to a young Afghani who had polio. And this guy, Muhammad was his name, he spoke a little bit of English, and we had fun. And he was a poet, and he told me about his poetry, and then he was happy with the wheelchair, but he said, you people, you should give me a computer, and I need a computer to write my poetry, and so on and so forth. So we had fun. And I left, and I never say, I'll see you again or I'll come back.
All
And
right.
for some reason, I said to him, he said, will you come back? And I said, yes, I will. And I went back, I was working for UNHCR at the time, and I wrote his story. And I wrote about his cheekiness, that he said, I need a computer. A week later, UNHCR Pakistan gets an email from the University of Toronto, from the students there who read the story, and they said, we've collected some money, we have a laptop for Mohammed, how can we get it to you?
Oh.
And, you know, in a humanitarian sense, maybe not very sustainable, but that showed me what an impact stories can make. My story from Pakistan went all the way to Canada,
Toronto, yes.
and they said, oh, we want to give him a computer. So that's for me, yeah, it's a beautiful little story.
I mean, you talk to Toronto, you talk to University and UNHCR. The fact is that you are here in Pakistan for a second time. You were here officially a couple of years back, and now you return to our beautiful country. I have talked to many diplomat during my career as a journalist, and those who come to Pakistan have always told me that they had a very different impression of the country before they came here. Once they were here, they were totally enamored by it, and there were some who, quote unquote, I mean, I have to tell you this because you told me some stories as well. I had one dean of the diplomatic corps who cried when he left Pakistan after 10 years. And this really happened during the course of my show. So people fall in love with our country. What is your experience and your, I wouldn't say admiration, your relationship with Pakistan?
You know, when I found out that I was going to Pakistan, I had just come down from Mount Everest. I had just climbed Mount Everest in 2009, and I was back at base camp, and I checked my email, and the Swiss Development Agency for Development and Cooperation asked me whether I would like to go to Pakistan as a so-called public information officer for OCHA. And I remember telling my mother, and my mother, the first reaction was, she said, oh my God, now you've survived Mount Everest, but now you go to Islamabad, it's so dangerous there. That was my mother's first reaction. Oh my God, now she's gone to Everest and now she goes to Islamabad. So I think Pakistan, people always worry, you know, about security and about, you know, what we see on the news, but we don't see on the news, you know, what a beautiful country it is, unless we talk about 8,000 meter climbing, because your beautiful country has 5 of the 8,000 meter peaks.
That you have climbed, I think.
I have not climbed, or I've climbed 6 8,000 meter peaks in total, but I've only summited 1 in Pakistan, and that was
Okay.
Broad Peak.
Okay.
But, so for me, Pakistan, and I still talk about it, it was one of the best times in my life. I had a
Okay.
beautiful, so why is it? I think the Pakistani people are just so generous, so loving, so hospitable. I mean, you know, just, you know, I've been in touch with the embassy, with Asma here over the last few months because of my visit here, and it's been beautiful, and the appreciation, also the beauty. I mean, I arrived at 4 o'clock this morning, so I'm still a little bit tired. And when I walked through the embassy here, I nearly cried because I have such fond memories. So it's just, I think, I mean, I don't know, people are always surprised when I say, oh my God, I loved my time in Pakistan.
Islamabad grows on you. I think Pakistan also grows on you.
Yeah.
It's like a little piece of your heart that remains with you even when you're not in the country. Billi, you talked about Broad Peak. Tell us a little bit about your experience as far as Broad Peak is concerned. Was it the first summit? I mean, was the first as far as Pakistan is concerned. But how did your, you know, putting Broad Peak as a reference, how did your career in mountaineering begin?
Well, I was born and bred in a Bavarian village. So I was born in Germany called Garmisch-Partenkirchen. The name you don't want to pronounce. It's a very typical long German name. And we are surrounded by mountains. Now, for me as a child, I had to go hiking with my parents. And hiking, you know, for a 7 or 8 year old, it's just not fun. And I hated it. And when I was a teenager, I just said, I don't want to go hiking anymore. And we used to have this saying, we used to say, so my teenage friends and I, we used to say, get rid of the mountains, we want a clear view to the Mediterranean Sea. Because the mountains were always in my way. But then, and my mother always used to say, I hope one day you meet a man who loves the mountains. And I said, Mum, I wouldn't look at him. And you know, life happens, and I moved to the UK. He was an Englishman and he was a climber. And I started rock climbing, and I really enjoyed the rock climbing. It was much more exciting than just hiking. And then Mike and I went to Nepal for the first time in 1998.
Oh.
So, and then we went trekking, and I hadn't been to Pakistan then, so I spent a lot of time in Nepal. And then we went our separate ways. Mike got married, he has children, he no longer climbs, and I continued climbing.
All right.
And
but he gave you the flavor of, you know,
absolutely, and I'm so grateful.
Mountaineering.
I'm so grateful to him. To this very day, I wouldn't do what I'm doing now without him. And then I climbed Mount Everest in 2009. And
but
then
1998 is when you say you started rock climbing.
Yeah.
What happened between 1998 and 2009?
oh, many things. So Mike and I would go to Nepal every year. So we climbed a 6,000 meter peak, a 7,000. We tried a 7,000 meter peak. In 2005, I tried an 8,000 meter peak, but wasn't very good at it. So you know, I stayed. So very different from, you know, a lot of the people who go to Mount Everest now, because people go to Mount Everest, even sometimes to K2, and they have no climbing experience. Because we have the Sherpas here in Pakistan, you have the Baltis, they fix the rope, they facilitate everything. So sometimes people at Everest Base Camp, they learn how to walk with crampons.
Oh.
See, when I climbed, when I went to Everest, I'm not a great autonomous mountaineer. I still need the help of the Sherpas, I need an expedition leader. But I had some experience with 6,000 and 7,000 meter peaks. And a lot of these people who go to Everest now, they just climb Everest and that's it. You know?
Was Everest a difficult experience for you?
No, Everest, well, you know, Everest is high, but Everest is very well organized. So for example, if we go back to Broad Peak, which I climbed 5 years ago in 2019, Broad Peak, even though it's a lot lower than Mount Everest is 8,848 meters, and Broad Peak is barely over 8,000. It's the 12th highest peak in the world, but it's raw. You know, the Karakoram, it's just raw, the weather is tougher, and also Mount Everest has been so developed over the years. You have the Sherpas, they fix the ropes, you have oxygen, you have, you know, your set camps. So Pakistan is still raw and it's more challenging. So climbing Everest, of course, it's a challenge. But somebody once said to me, oh, what an adventure to climb Mount Everest. No, climbing Mount Everest is not an adventure.
It was climbing Broad Peak, that was more of an adventure for you.
Absolutely, just walking into base camp. Have you ever been there?
No, I haven't. That's why I'm asking you.
You haven't lived, you need to go there. You know, the Baltoro go there as long as it's still there. You know, with climate change, you don't know what's going to happen. But it's so rough. It's such a rough path, and by the time you get to base camp, you're already exhausted. And also in Pakistan, you don't have so much helicopter traffic, because here only the army flies, whereas in Nepal, you have so many helicopter companies. At Everest Base Camp now, on a busy day, you have 100 helicopters a day.
Oh,
Yes.
that must be too much.
It's too much.
For the traffic control, it must be exhausting as well, to control as well. 14 8,000ers are the number of peaks that you have climbed to date.
No, I have 6.
6.
There are 14 in the world, and I climbed 6.
Okay, so you
Yes.
climbed 6.
No.
Of those 6, what was the most, I wouldn't say adventurous, but the most tempting to climb? Apart from Broad Peak.
Apart from Broad Peak, we talked about Broad Peak, and Broad Peak was beautiful. And I attempted Broad Peak once before in 2015, and
okay.
we didn't get up, but there was a big avalanche.
Okay.
I think maybe Makalu. Makalu is the 5th highest mountain in the world, and that is quite challenging.
Where is it located?
It's in Pakistan.
Okay.
Sorry, in
No,
Nepal.
it's not. Yes.
It's not in Pakistan. It's in Nepal. It's right next to Mount Everest.
Okay.
Now, you have to know that you can climb these high mountains with oxygen or without oxygen. Now, the 5 highest mountain in the world, that's Everest, K2, Kanchenjunga, nobody's heard of Kanchenjunga, Lhotse, Makalu, they have traditionally been often climbed with oxygen.
All right.
But then it falls, Makalu is almost 8.5, and then Choyu is 8,200 meters, and that makes a huge difference. Now, I've climbed 3 of the bigger ones with oxygen, and then the 3 other ones, Broad Peak, for example, without oxygen. It's just something I really need to highlight. Also, Mount Everest, climbing it without oxygen is a different story. The people who climb Mount Everest without oxygen are heroes. It's if you think 7,000 people have climbed Mount Everest, and 230 without supplemental oxygen. So it's only the best of the best can do it. I could never do it. But now I've veered away. So Makalu, I climbed with supplemental oxygen. I wanted to climb it without, but it was too hard. And that was quite a challenging mountain. It's, as I said, it's almost 8,500 meters. It's got a couloir up, but it's beautiful. And
you say challenging, but you also call Broad Peak challenging. What difference do you feel as far as the ascent to Makalu and to Broad Peak?
Okay, so Broad Peak, I think it's the whole package.
Okay.
As I just said, just getting to base camp. You walk across the Baltoro Glacier for 7 days, and it's so, it's up and down, and so by the time you get to base camp, you're exhausted. Exactly. So with Makalu, I have to admit, I normally walk to all the base camps, but with Makalu, I walked to Everest base camp, and then I took a helicopter to base camp. So access, for example, a lot easier in Nepal these days than in Pakistan. And then in Pakistan, again, in Nepal now, and Pakistan is catching up because the 8,000 meter peaks are getting commercialized. But, look at Everest Base Camp. We have luxuries, we have the best food, we have everything, even high up on the mountain. We have cooks up there, and that does not yet happen in Pakistan.
Maybe with more, when it becomes more commercial and when more and more people come, it will, also push private companies to come in and invest as far as the whole mountaineering process is concerned, and maybe then you'll get the luxuries like
but I don't want this. This is very important to me. I don't need that luxury. And that's why I so enjoy climbing in Pakistan, because it is still raw, like I said, but it's changing.
Okay.
And K2, everybody knows K2, which is actually called Chagori, which is called the mountain of the mountain, because K2 is just this beautiful mountain.
It is.
And I never thought that K2 would ever be commercialized, that it would ever, because K2 to me is a very difficult, very dangerous mountain. Up high, you have the so-called bottleneck, and it's like a hanging glacier, and this glacier can stay there for another 10 years, but it could also come down in the next 10 seconds. You don't know. And I never thought K2 would go the way Everest has gone, commercial, but it is.
It is now. Things change.
Yes.
Elizabeth Hawley is a name that comes frequently when you read about your life and your career. How did she influence you and your career as far as mountaineering is concerned?
Oh, Elizabeth Hawley really changed my life. I think I learned a lot from her. So she was an American lady. She was actually born 101 years ago, and she came to Nepal in the late 50s, and she was a journalist, and she was fascinated by mountaineering expeditions, and then started interviewing them. And back in the days, in the 50s and 60s, there was 2 international flights a week to Nepal, and Miss Hawley would drive to the airport with her Beetle and she would look at the mountaineers, at the people who arrive. They're wearing big mountaineering boots. Come over here. Where are you going? Okay, this is your name, this is your address, this is your date of birth. You go and climb this mountain and then you check in with me again.
Okay.
And that was the creation. She started as a hobby, and her hobby then became an institution. And now we have the so-called Himalayan database. We cover 450 mountains, but only in Nepal.
Okay.
And when I was in Nepal, I met her. And I asked her, can I help you? Because I thought it was intriguing. Like my journalistic spirit came out. I wanted to talk to the mountaineers. And I started helping her. And I thought I was going to do it for a season or two.
Okay.
And now I've been doing it for 20 years.
That's long.
Yes, she passed away in 2018.
Okay.
She stopped doing it when she was 92.
Okay.
She did her last interview when she was 92 years old.
Oh my.
And then
Look at her dedication.
Yes. So she was an amazing lady. She never looked back. You know, she was 92 when she handed me the scepter, so to speak, and said, now you do it. And I said, Miss Hawley, how does it feel, you know, to give up what you've been doing for over 50 years and you were so passionate about it? And she looked at me, she said, passionate? How could you possibly be passionate about a database? She said, I've never been passionate about anything, but I started it, I finished it, and now you continue. And she never looked back.
All right.
You know, and I think what I learned from her, and we can all learn from her, is to grow old with grace.
Exactly.
Don't look back and think, oh, I can't do this anymore. I could. No, think, you know what, I've done it. Great.
I think this is very important. Whatever you do, whichever career you choose, whichever path you want to pursue, you need to do it with a lot of zeal, fervor and passion. I think these are three key words without which you cannot succeed in whatever you do. And I've seen when you look at, when one looks at you, I mean, from journalism to mountaineering, it was because you had a passion for it. And that is why you are where you are. That's why you are here, my guest, and I'm talking to you. What brings you to Pakistan this time?
Well, today is the International Mountain Day.
Yes.
And I think that's what brought me to Pakistan. And dear Asma from the Swiss Embassy brought me to Pakistan. So she rang me, I think in August it was, or in July this year, and said, you know, we're organizing something, would you come? And my heart, you know, was
just
smiling, and I said, yes. And of course, I would love to stay a little bit longer, but I only have like 4 days here.
Oh.
But yeah, so I'm here at the Swiss
That's
Embassy.
too little, returning to the country that you fell in love with, and just for 4 days.
I know. But I have a mum who's 91 years old.
Oh.
And I have to be also with her, and I have a job, and you know, so I always have too many fingers and too many pies. But yeah, but I'm so happy that I could make it, that I could be here. So it's the International Mountain Day. I'm here, and hopefully tomorrow I'll go to the Margala Hills, because the Margala Hills used to be my playground. I used to go running there, and it's so beautiful.
Things have changed, but you know, the Margala Hills still retain its soul, its essence, as you'll see when you go there.
Yes.
I mean, let's talk about one of your pies, you said. I'm just referencing all the work that you've done. The Himalayan database, tell us a little bit about this. Tell us a little bit about the work that you have been pursuing along with Miss Hawley.
Yes. So, as I explained, Miss Hawley made her hobby an institution. So, we have in Nepal more than 450 so-called expedition peaks. And every peak you climb in Nepal, and I think it's different in Pakistan, you have to do this with a trekking agency. You have to have a permit. So for example, if you want to climb Mount Everest, I mean, if you buy your ticket or your Everest expedition with a commercial operator, it's between $70,000 and $80,000 for 6 to 7 weeks. But $15,000 goes straight to the Nepal government, because that's the permit. So So everybody has to check in with the Nepal government and with the trekking agency. So what Ms. Hawley did, she had, I mean, back in the days, now it's no longer possible because there's too many people. But she had like 20 trekking agencies who she knew, they organize expeditions, and we would ring them up and say, who's coming, who's going, where are they going? And we meet the people when they arrive, you know. the Sherpas and the foreigners and find out who they are, and then when they come back. And then we write down, you know, did they summit, did they not summit, with Sherpa, with oxygen, without oxygen. And now we have something called the Himalayan database. And if you wanted to know how many Pakistanis have climbed Mount Everest, I can tell you. I think there were, I don't know, 2 climbed it without oxygen.
Okay.
Yes.
And this Himalayan database contains how many names, how many numbers do you have of such mountaineers?
Thousands.
Thousands, all right.
Thousands. Yeah, thousands. I mean, I would say, because we do all the attempts. So we have 450 mountains, and we not only do we talk to people who summit. So if you go, let's say, to Annapurna 1, and you only get to base camp and you look at the mountain, you think, oh my God, this is too big, I'm going. I still want to talk to you. Because if you then look at the database, how many people attempt the mountain, and what's the percentage of the people who summit, we need you, even though you didn't leave base camp, but you wanted to. You attempted the mountain, only, even though it was only in your mind. But you bought the permit, and yeah.
But it also means that people get to share their experiences of what is the commonality when it comes to all these mountaineers who come to climb different peaks. What is the basic motivation, the basic reason for them to climb mountains? Is it a specific reason, or does it differ from person to person?
Well, if Miss Hawley were still alive and you would have put the question to her, she would have said, they're all mad. Because Miss Hawley never climbed. She never climbed.
Yeah.
She never even went to Everest Base Camp. For her, these people are all crazy. So who are the people? I mean, if we look, okay, I don't want to single out Everest, but I'd start with Everest. Why do people want to climb Everest? Because it's the biggest, because it's there, because Everest, you get admiration for it. You know, people, I mean, everybody has their reason, and every reason, whether they want to be great on social media, or whether they do it for their deceased mother, or whether it was a childhood dream, every reason is valid. But, you know, the people, of course, you need to be extremely resilient, you know, even though Everest is so facilitated, the Sherpas help you and they take you by the hand, but you still, you know, you're out there in the elements and you have to put one foot in front of the other, you know. So you have to be resilient, you have to be driven, and you have to be, and I think that is the crux, mentally strong. 80% of climbing Everest is up here, and I'm not a very strong mountaineer. I'm not very good, but
You're mentally strong.
I'm mentally strong and I love it. You need the love for the mountain. And you know.
And you need the mental strength. I think it's a mental acumen, mental strength, plus the passion or the love to climb mountains, the love for mountains in general. I think
the
that
love for
needs to
mountain,
do.
yeah, and the respect for the mountains. And you know, of course, you have to live with, hey, I'm not going to shower for the next 3 weeks. I'm not going to change my clothes for the next 2 weeks. So that, but what I find now, through social media also, everything, you know, seems, even K2. I mean, K2 is still called the Savage Mountain. I mean, I don't really like it, because I think mountains are kind when we're kind to them and when we respect them. But I think now, with so many people climbing these mountains so quickly, you know, they helicopter from base camp to base camp, they go up and they don't even know where they are anymore. And I think what we're dealing with at the moment is we lose respect for the mountain. And I think that's something which is very dear to me. Just, you know, you don't have to be afraid, but you have to respect the mountain. And that's getting lost a little bit. That's
very important. And I think respect also is part of diplomacy. And I feel very strongly that mountaineering or tourism in any country, whether it be in Pakistan through mountaineering or in Nepal, as you talked about, through mountaineering, you know, somehow bridges relations between countries and brings them together, because the mountaineers come from different countries and they, you know, come to your country. They also somehow, even if they go directly to the mountains, they are, you know, open. They're looking at what is happening in the country, and they are imbibing some of it, and they're giving some of their own culture and there's some of their own values to the people around them. So I think it's a very important mechanism to improve diplomatic relations, people-to-people contact, which
Yeah.
is so important, very important facet of diplomacy. Let's talk about your book, Ish Habin Ride in Kathmandu.
Oh, very good.
I was
have
live here.
Yes.
All right, let's talk about this. When and how did you get the, the inspiration to write one?
Interesting question, because I didn't want to write that book. So an Austrian publisher approached me and said, "We think you should write a book." And I said, "No, thank you very much. I don't want to write a book because I think I have to experience more." And at the time, I didn't know what an honor it was, because so many people write a book, then they have an agent, then they look for a publisher. And now, people read less and less. It's becoming harder and harder.
True.
So initially, I felt a little bit overwhelmed to write this book. And then a Swiss-German journalist, Karin Steinbach, who's written a few mountaineering books,
All right.
or co-wrote it, they asked me whether I would like to co-write it with Karin. And that really helped me, because I didn't feel so alone in this, and she had experience. And then,
What does the title mean exactly?
I have a bike in Kathmandu.
Okay.
And it's an interesting thing, because, the book, we've sold 3,500 copies over the span of a year, and I'm not really a big name. It's only the German market. But I do think, had we had Everest in the title, it would have sold better.
All right.
Because people pick it up and they think it's a cycling book. Now, why did we call it Ich habe ein Rad in Kathmandu is because I bought a bicycle in Kathmandu 20 years ago, and people know me with my bicycle. People knew me in Pakistan with my bicycle. And I hope that I will translate it into English soon, because my time in Pakistan is a very big part of my book.
Oh.
Yeah. And I remember, so I brought my bicycle here, and the boss of OCHA, Manuel Bessler, said to me, "Oh, I don't know whether the United Nations security allows your bicycle, but we have no regulations against it." So, and then I would just ride my bicycle, and then I would see the people from UNDSS, from the security, and I rang Manuel and said, "Oh my God, Manuel, the people from the security saw me. I hope we're not getting in trouble." And he said, "Billi, I get an email from them once a week saying, 'We advise you to tell Billi not to use her bicycle.'" And I said, "Well, you never do." And he said, "Well, I know that you would leave if I take away your bicycle, so I just delete the emails." So for me, a bicycle is freedom.
Okay.
And that's why I like the title, because, I'm now here for 3 days, and I'm going to go somewhere tomorrow to hire a bicycle, because for me, I can get to places without having to wait for a bus or a driver. And so the whole experience about writing a book was interesting, because I thought, if you write a book, you write a book for 3 years.
True.
No, if you have a contract with a publisher, they say has to be finished in October.
Oh.
Yeah. So Karen and I started in March. It was written in October. And I never thought about what I was writing about. I just sat down and I wrote.
Did your journalistic experience help you while writing
Yeah.
the book?
And I did a lot of interviews. A lot of people write books. They don't interview people. I interviewed a lot of people. And I quote a lot of people, but that is my journalistic experience, because I don't actually, even though I've been talking about myself for the last 40 minutes, I don't actually like talking about myself so much. I like telling other people's stories. And if you look at my book...
This is what you were doing. You're telling me your story.
Yes, now I'm telling you my story. But if you look at my book, so I think bookshops find it difficult. They don't really find a shelf. Where does this book go? Yes, it's sort of a mountaineering book, but if I were to describe my book describes my encounter with people. If I can I tell you one encounter I had in Pakistan?
Please.
One of my most wonderful encounters. I used to, when I didn't have so much time in the morning before work, I used to run around E7. And every morning there were these 3 Pakistani men that were just very nicely dressed, and they would go for a walk in the morning, and I'd always say Assalamu alaikum, and they would always smile at me. And so one morning I ran, and there was only one of these gentlemen, tiny little man, and I run, and he stops me, and he opens up his arms, and he gives me a big hug, and he said, "You are my morning star."
Oh.
Every morning We see you run, you smile at us, it makes us so happy. And that was, you know, in Islamabad, in the middle of the road, you know, a, a stranger just hugged me and told me that every morning it makes him happy when I smile.
It must have been so endearing, you know,
Yes.
that very moment. The fact that it still stays with you
Absolutely.
is proof of that.
And my book is full of these stories. And then, of course, about mountaineering and a little bit about myself. But it was an interesting, you know, when you write a book, you go down memory lane, you know, and then you look at old photos and you think, oh my God, I was so young. Oh my God. Oh my
You know,
God.
talking about your career, you also have that humanitarian side to you. You work with the Swiss Humanitarian Aid as well. Tell us about that experience. Why choose to be, you know, to associate yourself with the humanitarian organization? What brought you to it?
I mean, it was during my time as a journalist in Switzerland, and I went to interview the head of Swiss Humanitarian Aid.
Okay.
I did an interview with him about, I don't know, some humanitarian issues. And then, of course, me being the opportunist, I just said to him after the interview, does humanitarian aid need journalists? And I thought he'd say, of course not. And he said, yes, we do. And he told me how I could apply to become part of the so-called Swiss Humanitarian Aid Unit, which I'm now a part of. So we have, I do it very quickly, the Swiss Humanitarian Aid Unit, it's unique in the world. The Swiss have, let's say, they have 7 or 8 buckets. One with doctors, one with nurses, one with water engineers, one with logisticians, and a tiny little bucket with journalists. And when there is a crisis somewhere and they need a media person, then they ring me or somebody else who's in my bucket. Say, Billy, can you go to Pakistan tomorrow? There were severe floods. We're leaving. We're sending a team tomorrow, so we go. And I love it. It's hard to say, because of course, when I go on mission, it means that other people suffer. So, of course, it's better for me not to go on mission, because then the world is a better place.
But I feel it's more of your exploratory side that you have examined or nurtured through your journalism, through your mountaineering, and through your humanitarian aid. This, I feel, is the commonality between the three.
And and then people ask me, but don't you get depressed? You know, when you see suffering and squalor and people, and I said, no, I'm not getting depressed. If I were getting depressed, I would be in the wrong job. Because what do I help people when I go there and say, oh my God, you're all so poor, it's so awful, and I cry? No. I think my job, and I try hard, is maybe to bring light to the people, and I always find light. You know, there's always hope. And the last mission I went to, it was Moria. There was this big refugee camp on the island of Lesbos in 2000, and it was 2020. It was during COVID. And yes, it's so sad. People have to leave their homes. They have nothing. They're waiting there. But you always met these 2 beautiful Afghani girls, and they were full of hope. And now they're both in Germany and they're studying. You know, and you get these stories. And they, even if you have one person, you've done your job.
Tell me a little bit about your nickname, Billi, the woman who says yes before thinking. Why do they call you that?
Who called me that? Somebody, yes, it's very true. I mean, I have a new presentation with the title, Say Yes and See What Happens. Because, and this is what you also have, the curiosity.
Yes.
And I'm always curious, and I always want to try out things. I always want to say yes, because I want to do everything. And I think that keeps me alive. And my mum, who's 91, has exactly the same. And her curiosity, something happens over at the neighbors, my mother, you know, she has to have a look. She is so curious, and her eyes shine when I
think curiosity is extremely, I think it's a very important part or aspect of your career as a journalist, or even your career as a mountaineer, or whichever career. If you're not curious about what you do, then you can't do it properly. The passion and curiosity kind of go hand in hand, don't they?
I totally agree. But, and I mentioned this before, that in my society, more and more people have lost that, because people so much love about talking about themselves and they don't want to find out about you anymore. And I think that's such a shame, but I find this more and more. And as I say now, I talk about myself, but that's my job now. But normally, you and I sit down and I'll ask you all the questions because I want to find out.
Exactly. It's exactly with me. This is why I feel like a kid in a candy shop whenever I meet someone.
Yes.
Or anybody. I want to know all about him or her, you know. And my questions might be very childish sometimes, but I just want to know everything about who I'm interviewing or who I'm talking to.
Yeah.
And I feel that curiosity is something that also, keeps that flame burning within you.
Keeps you alive, keeps you young, and I hope I'll keep my curiosity for a long time and keep my, my willingness to explore new places. And yes, I mean, I'm happy that I still have my mother, but of course, I can't. If somebody now said to me, Billi, I have a job in Pakistan for 6 months, it would be hard for me to take it. I would love to, but I also want to spend time with my mum, because, and that's more family first. But of course, but then I have, I'm here now, I go back to Nepal, so I have a beautiful life.
Challenges that you've had as a mountaineer in this huge career that you've had on all the different peaks that you've climbed in Pakistan, in Nepal, elsewhere as well. What are the basic challenges, cultural, environmental or humanitarian challenges that you've encountered that you would like others to know as well? So that they can, they are well prepared in advance.
Yeah, I mean, culturally, yes, of course, I think we have to prepare, culturally for every country. I mean, especially Pakistan, in Pakistan, I mean, I have seen women, with shorts, trekking, and makes me feel uncomfortable in Pakistan. In Nepal, you can do it. I think when you go to these countries, the culture, we have to learn so much. It's more, I mean, I speak Nepali.
Adapt to the culture, basically.
Absolutely, you have to adapt to the culture. But I think I mentioned this before, when you go to a high peak, just don't, because sometimes we say in English, we say, oh, we go on the summit push, or in Spanish you say atacar la cima, we attack the mountain. We don't attack it. I think we need to work with the mountain and respect the mountain. And I think that, and also prepare for the mountain. As I say, people go to Mount Everest, they have very little experience. Maybe sometimes they've climbed Kilimanjaro. Kilimanjaro is the highest mountain in Africa, and that's barely higher than Everest Base Camp. So Kilimanjaro is 5,900, Everest Base Camp is 5,400. And they think, oh, they can go climb Everest. So be aware, prepare yourself for the mountain. Altitude, we have to acclimatize. Acclimatization is so important. That's a huge challenge. We can't just go from base camp to the summit. It's not possible. We have to go up and down because we need to create red blood cells. And people die. And people die for no reason, because they ignore the signals coming from their body. And why? Because they need to get to the summit. The summit is the bonus. I'm always happy when I make it to the summit, but you ask me, I've been on many mountains and I didn't summit, and I still had a good time. Because, hey, if I get to the summit, I'm always surprised when I get up there. But the summit is only one day.
True.
A whole expedition
is
is
the whole
5,
experience,
6,
from beginning to the end.
Yeah, it's 5-6 weeks.
How do you feel all of your expeditions, the work you've done, the book you've written, do you feel it has impacted somehow, somewhere, the perception of mountaineering in your country, Switzerland, or in other countries across the world?
I hope so. So you mean how the people perceive the mountains?
No,
or
your experience that you've shared through your book, through your blog, because if we type it on Google, you have so many things in your name.
Oh, really?
So
I need to Google myself.
Oh, you should, because I did
Maybe not.
before I came to the show. So, I just wanted to understand how does experiences such as yours also, change perception of people as far as the whole experience of mountaineering is concerned? Have people in Switzerland or elsewhere told you, oh, we read your book, or we went through your blog, and that made us understand better the whole concept of mountaineering, and our understanding was made more prolific through
that? No, now I understand the question. No, I think I have, and I think it's a beautiful thing. I think I've inspired people. I think I've motivated people, which is the most beautiful thing. People to go to Nepal and go trekking, or to, I also write in my book about my hip replacement because I have an artificial hip. I got it 3 years ago, and I write in my book about it, and people write to me and they say, oh, Billi, I need a new hip. Can you tell me? I said, yes, do it. And also how they perceive the Sherpas, the role of the Sherpas. It's a big part of my book, how the Sherpas have changed, how they now have a different role in Nepal, from being the servants to being, the bosses on the mountain. So, yeah, I hope so.
All right. Finally, I'll just merge my last two questions together. And that, of course, firstly, do you have any other mountaineering, goals that you would like to achieve in the coming months or in the coming years? If they are so, would you like to share some of those goals with us? And finally, would you like to give any message to the country you fell in love with a couple of years back that you are back in now for a couple of days?
Okay, well, yes, so I've got 6 8,000 meter peaks. There are 14 out there, and I always thought, wouldn't it be nice to have 7? Because 7 is half of 14. And there is one mountain in your beautiful country, in Pakistan. It's called Gasherbrum 2.
Yes.
It's the 12th highest mountain in the world, and I think, for me, I have to look, what can I do? I don't want to use supplemental oxygen. I wouldn't go to K2. It's too dangerous, it's too difficult, now it's too crowded. But a lot of elements have to fit together. I have to have the right team, the weather has to be good, my mum has to be okay. So let's see, but maybe next year. Maybe next year I'll be back in Pakistan and go to Gasherbrum 2. Sometimes people say, do you still climb high mountains? I said, yes, of course.
Climb every mountain, as the song says.
Exactly, climb every mountain. And hey, a message to the people of this beautiful country. I've just spoken to Asma and I showed her a few photos. And have you ever been to Skardu, the Baltoro? No,
yes,
she hasn't even. Go out and explore your own country. You don't have to go to K2 base camp. Also go to Chitral. Have you been to Chitral?
No, I haven't been to Chitral, but I would love to go there.
The Tiricmir, the highest. Are you from Chitral? Beautiful. The Hindu Kush, very nice. And Tiricmir is the highest mountain in the Hindu Kush. And I'd love to climb that. But let's see. So go out and look at your own country and
All right. So go on, explore your country, understand and know your country better is what Billi Bierling leaves us as parting note. And I think it's very important. A lot of people live in a country but don't know what that country is all about, or don't understand that country. I think if you are a citizen of a country, before you go and explore other countries, I think it's better to understand where you come from, your origins, your country, your roots, your soul and your soil. Then you can explore other parts of the world, and then you can become a better person, maybe spiritually, mentally and physically, just like Billi Bierling has become one. She has made other countries her home as well, including Pakistan, which she fell in love with and still is in love with. We hope she will leave a little piece of her heart when she leaves Pakistan this time, and she'll return to capture that piece of the heart when she summits Gasherbrum 2 in the coming months. And we wish her all the very best. And of course, as they say, mountaineering is something that brings so many people from so many countries together as well. And I feel as a people-to-people contact is a very important aspect of diplomacy. It plays a very important role. And I'm sure, Billi, you would agree with me, because you've seen so many people from so many different nationalities come together, work together, climb the mountains together and understand each other together. Isn't this the whole aspect or the whole base of diplomacy, to understand each other better? This is what you do through your mountaineering as well. Understand people, and sometimes understanding mountains is also extremely important. Thank you very much, Billi Bierling, to have joined us. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of this show. We'll see you inshallah with another show very soon with another guest. Till then, stay tuned right here to PTV World. And Billi, thank you so very much.
Thank you
so
much
much. It
for
was a
having
wonderful,
me.
wonderful conversation we had.
Thank you. Thank you very much.